Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Dan here with you as always, and on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, we're going to do a little Q&A, answering some questions from you awesome listeners out there. I'm always looking for questions, so hit me up on the socials, facebook.com/Casper Sports. Reminder, that's Casper with a K. Instagram, look me up, Dan Casper Sports, and the X at Dan Casper. Always want some questions to be included on the podcast. So we're going to get to a few of those coming up here in just a little bit. Of course, we're going to end it with a little walk-off and such, but want to open up the podcast, and I know we're in the thick of baseball season right now, but we are actually just, depending on your team, a couple weeks, maybe even less than a couple weeks away from the start of the NFL training camp season. So I was thinking about this the other day regarding the NFC North, because, again, I'm a big believer that the NFC North is the best division in football this year. We saw a little bit of that last year. I think the division has gotten even closer this year. When you look at I like what the Bears did, as painful as that is for me as a Packers fan to say. I like what the Bears did this offseason. Ben Johnson, I thought they made some smart coach hires and smart roster moves and such. So, and then the Vikings, they move on from Sam Darnold. They're handing the reins over to J.J. McCarthy, but everything else is kind of in place. But they also made some smart moves, I thought, on the defensive line in the offseason. Lions losing both of their coordinators. And I think, you look at that and how much of an effect is that going to have on the team this year. And then, you look at the Packers. Obviously, probably one of their biggest moves in the offseason was releasing Jair Alexander. They did make a couple moves and bringing in Nate Hobbs and Banks on the offensive line and such. But specifically, when we look at it from the offensive side of things, for all these teams in the NFC North, I think, each offense has some question marks or some unknowns surrounding it, if you will. So I was thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, which of these scenarios are most likely to happen with each team's offensive unit? So, I'll go through these, and it'll probably maybe explain a little bit better. So, for the Bears, I think it's pretty obvious. There's a hope, there's an expectation amongst the Bears and Bears fans that Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams will form the dynamic duo a lot of people think will happen, or hope will happen, however you want to phrase it. So, for the Vikings, I think you look at the quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy will play at a high level. Will play some high-level quarterback. That's the expectation, right, for the Vikings. For the Lions, I think it starts again with the coordinators. Jared Goff and the offense won't miss a beat. And then for the Packers, I'm going to go with the Packers wide receivers develop into a top group overall. So of those four that I just listed, of those four scenarios, how would I rank them in terms of what is most likely to happen to not likely to happen? So I'd love to hear from you too. I'm sure we're all going to have different opinions and different picks and such. And I'm really, really trying not to play the homer side of this. I feel like I do a pretty good job at that. I feel like I'm a pretty level-headed Packers fan. And so when I went through this, I did my best. I feel like I did my best. And I know I'm probably still going to get called out on either side. I'll be called a hater or rose-colored glasses, if you will. So, but here are my rankings. I'll start from least likely to happen. I am going to go with least likely to happen. I'm going to go with the Lions. I'm going to go with that Jared Goff and the offense won't miss a beat. I think Ben Johnson and the job that he did, and remember, they also lost some position coaches too that followed Ben Johnson to Chicago. The job that Ben Johnson did, so dialed in to what Jared Goff can do, to what Jared Goff was comfortable with and doing. And remember, Ben Johnson wasn't the first offensive coordinator that Dan Campbell brought in. Okay? He wasn't. He was a replacement when the Lions fired offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn. And then Ben Johnson took over and ended up getting the job full time. So I think there is going to be a drop-off. And I think we're going to see it especially at the beginning of the year. Maybe they'll figure it out a little bit later on and kind of get into a groove. But I think you're going to see some growing pains. I think you're going to see some, just kind of getting used to each other. I think that's a big loss for that offense to lose Ben Johnson. So I've got that at number 3 or at number 4, is my least likely scenario to happen, that Jared Goff and the offense won't miss a beat. I just think that's going to be a tough hill to climb to kind of continue the path that they have been on the offensive side for the last couple of years. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Vikings, and that J.J. McCarthy will play a high level quarterback. Will play at a high level at that quarterback position. J.J. McCarthy. Now, maybe the better question is like, okay, well, how do we define a high level quarterback? Are we talking about Patrick Mahomes? Are we talking about Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen? Or are we talking maybe the second tier and such? Like, where is that line for high level? Maybe the Vikings are just wanting good or acceptable quarterback play. But I think if you're a top 10 draft pick from a couple of years ago, there's an expectation to play the quarterback position at a high level. And maybe I'm playing a little bit of the odds here, but we just don't know. We haven't seen him. Even though he was a rookie last year, we didn't see him except for a few times in the preseason. So what I think does help J.J. McCarthy is Kevin O'Connell is his head coach and play caller. He's surrounded by offensive talent with Justin Jefferson, Addison, Aaron Jones, and an improved offensive line. So he's got that going. But I'm going to play the odds here a little bit just because it's such an unknown. He is such an unknown player, and we didn't get to see him in the regular season at this point. So I got him I got this situation at number 3. But I do think he is surrounded with the support and the talent to be a good quarterback. It's all going to be up to him. It's all going to be up to him at this point. Number 2, I am going to go with the Bears. Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams form the dynamic duo everyone thinks. Now, I will say this. I think one question mark is going to be, can Ben Johnson transition into a very good head coach? Because we have seen many examples of coaches, coordinators who have, been promoted to a head coach, and it hasn't worked out. But we've seen these examples of coaches where, you know what? They're just better as coordinators. That's what they're really good at. And Ben Johnson coming in, first-time head coach, there's going to be more on his plate. I think the question surrounding him is, can he handle all that? Can he transition into a really good offensive play caller, offensive coordinator, and add more responsibilities that comes with being a head coach for an NFL team? That is a question mark. But I do think this was a good hire by the Bears, and I think you factor in some of the moves that they made in the offseason, specifically to improve their offensive line to give more protection to Caleb Williams. And I give Ben Johnson a ton of credit for the job that he did with Jared Goff in Detroit, building an offense that best suits his skill set. And I think Ben Johnson's going to do just that with Caleb Williams. And kind of like J.J. McCarthy, Caleb Williams has talent surrounding him. He's got an improved offensive line. He's got receivers with him, right? DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. They got a new tight end to go with Cole Kmet. So, I mean, they've got weapons on the offensive side, and we know they want to run the football too. Look at what Ben Johnson did in Detroit. That's going to help out Caleb Williams. So I think you are going to see this dynamic duo. Maybe not necessarily right away in the first year, but I think we're going to see glimpses of that in the first year. And for the rest of the division, it's something that they're going to have to take notice and prepare for years to come. But my number one, call me a homer if you want. I don't care. I really tried not to put him at number one, but I fully believe that this Packers wide receivers group is going to develop into a top group. Now, again, we could sit here and say, what do we define as a top group? What's that number? Where's that ranking? I'm going to say I think this group develops overall, all right? Not just like one guy or two guys. I'm going to go overall. I'm going to say that this is between a top 5 and a top 10 wide receiving group in the NFL, that they will develop into that. Down year last year, a lot of issues with the drops. Jaden Reed's entering his third year. Dontavian Wicks is entering his third year. Romeo Doubs is entering a contract situation. Who knows when we're going to see Christian Watson back. Matthew Golden's coming in. Savion Williams is coming in. You got a veteran in McCole Hardman. You've got a group of wide receivers that bring a bunch of different skill sets. You pair it up with an offense that is going to be creative in trying to get them the football. I think you're going to see this group, especially the guys that played on the team last year, have improved years. Dontavian Wicks, explosive off the line of scrimmage. I think you're going to see him improve with his catch percentage. Jaden Reed, I think, is going to be a little bit more of a focus within the offense. In my gut, I just have this feeling that Romeo Doubs is going to ball out in a contract year. Matthew Golden, I think, is going to develop eventually into the number one wide receiver on this offense. Savion Williams, for a big 6'4", 220-plus wide receiver, is such a unique wide receiver that you're going to see kind of, I think, a bigger version of a Deebo Samuel. There's a bunch of different type of wide receivers within this group that I think eventually that's all going to kind of mold in together into a top unit. One of the best overall wide receiver units in the league. I believe that. Believe me, though, I tried not putting this at number one, but I'm confident in that. I'm confident in that. So those are my scenario rankings offensively. Where are yours? All right. What would you rank as the scenario most likely to happen? Where would you rank the scenario that's least likely to happen? Again, hit me up on the socials. All right. Hit me up. I'm curious and would love to hear your opinions. Let's do a little Q&A now, though. All right, shall we? Let's do a little Q&A before we hit up our walk-off at the end. So, again, big thanks to everybody who sent over some questions, and keep doing those, all right? I don't care if you don't think it's a good question or such, but we'll just go through a few of these before we get to our walk-off, which will relate to baseball, too. Let's start off with Jim. Jim sent over a question. If you could change one rule in any major sport, what would it be and why? Now, after I say mine, I guarantee you I'm going to come up with a few more that I wish I would have said. I just feel that that's going to be the way. I would change, one of mine I would change is and this would specifically, I think, go to the NFL, where I hate the fact that some plays are reviewable and some are not. I'm not saying more challenges. I think, you can't have unlimited challenges from a coach in that. I think you could keep them the same, but to say that certain plays are not reviewable, that just blows my mind. How do you decide how a certain play is reviewable and another one is not? So to me, I think you make them all reviewable. But you still keep them as, if you get your first two challenges right, then you get a third one. If you get one wrong, hey, you only got one left, okay? So I know there's some people who that would just make the game longer. No, not if you keep the same amount of challenges. But there's stupid sometimes we see like New York or the officiating call in and correct it. Why can't we do that more often for all the plays if it's so obvious? Like, it just boggles my mind. Like, that play's reviewable, but that one's not. Why? Like, why? Where's the commandments on that? Like, how do they decide that this one was absolutely reviewable and this one, no, we're not going to make reviewable? It just seems dumb to me. It seems dumb. Alex sent in a question. What's the one sports trend or hot take that you are tired of hearing about? I don't know if this is necessarily a trend. I think the hot take part of it, though, is the whole Giannis stuff. And, I mean, it's just been going on for years and years and years about him wanting out of Milwaukee and Milwaukee should trade him and such. And it's just, it boggles – I shouldn't say it boggles my mind because it is clearly obvious to me it's a small market situation. You never hear about this with, like, Steph Curry. Steph Curry, I know, won a few championships with the Golden State Warriors, but are the Golden State Warriors championship caliber team right now? I wouldn't say so. But you don't hear about that with Steph Curry, that he should be out of there trying to chase more rings. I don't know if it's just because he's won already a few of them, but you don't hear that. And you don't hear it with some of the other, big names and bigger markets and such. So I'm tired of the hot take that Giannis should demand out, that Giannis should demand a trade, that he should get out of there. And it hasn't just been this year. It's been the last few years. And it's getting old and it's getting tired. And I'm not saying that Giannis is going to stay in Milwaukee the whole time of it or his whole career. I honestly feel like he's probably eventually going to play for a different team at some point. But right now, it's been getting tired. It's been getting old. And we have not heard definitively that Giannis wants out, that he wants out. So I'm kind of tired of that one for sure. So this was a good one, and I had to think about it for a little bit. Ben asked, what's one draft pick you wish your favorite team could undo? Now, I thought that was a good one, and when I think about this, I got to go back to probably like the Packers, right? When you think about their draft and some of the guys that they picked over the years and such, and we could go through a bunch of them. But for this one, I'll kind of specifically like stay with first round picks and such. Obviously I think the 2017 one is the clear winner in this. It's I could go and try to pick a different one just to make it not so obvious, but I think it's a clear winner in this. It's trading your pick at the back end of the first round and moving, getting the first pick in the second round, bypassing TJ Watt, and then drafting Kevin King with the first pick in the second round. That, I think, is the clear number one pick right now that I think every Packers fan would undo. And you go through some of these drafts, we could go through a bunch of different years, and there's probably ones when you look back at it, it's always hindsight 2020 with this thing. But that's the one that probably really, really sticks out to a ton of Packers fans right now. So I wanted to do one more question. And this one's from Matt. If you could bring back one athlete in their prime to play today, who would it be? Now, I'm assuming this is just an athlete to play on the team that they played back in the day, like on the team that they played on back in the day. So, like, for example, Barry Sanders, I'd bring Barry Sanders back, but he would still play with the Lions. You're not necessarily putting him on your favorite team. So that's what I'm going to operate under. A player that I would love to see. So I'm going to go with a player that I never got to see either. So that's the other part. I'm going to go with a player that I never that I wasn't around. I would go Don Hudson just because I want to watch Don Hudson's speed. I want to watch Don Hudson. The other person I'd throw in there is probably Babe Ruth. I'd love to see Bobby Jones golf. I'm looking at that era. I think that's one of my favorite eras, sports history, early 1900s, 1930s, 1940s, and such. I always said that I would love to go into a DeLorean, go into a time machine, and go back to like the 1930s and 40s and watch sports, like pulling up in cars and fields and watching a football game, going to the polo grounds and watching baseball. Lou Gehrig would be another one I would love to watch. Those are the four that I would really love to probably bring back in their primes, or in this case, maybe go back in time and watch in their prime. Those are the four that go to the top of my head. Don Hudson, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Bobby Jones. So, appreciate the questions again. Send those on over. Keep sending those on over to me. All right, let's wrap up this episode of the podcast with a little walk-off. And if you're not sure what the walk-off is just we end trying to get into a trend, into a rhythm where we end every podcast with a quick commentary, kind of like Jerry Springer's final thoughts back in the day. But obviously, walk-off's got a little bit of a sports theme to it. So, got to give it to the Brewers here, because the Brewers coming off of a sweep against the Dodgers. You look at this team right now; they're in the playoff chase. They're approaching the Cubs for first place. If I'm a Cubs fan, I got to be a little bit nervous. If I'm the Cubs, I got to be a little bit nervous. But this is a team, that Joe Davis from the Dodgers the other day, announcer for them, said, we got to stop being surprised every year that the Brewers are a good team. And I think he's exactly right. And I think as us Brewers fans, maybe we got to stop thinking about that too. But that's a credit to Matt Arnold. That's a credit to Pat Murphy. And that's just a credit to the structure of the front office and the coaching staff over the years. I know Brewers fans have had a lot of frustration with ownership and Mark Anasio for maybe not spending a little bit more on roster. And I would echo some of those sentiments. But that's where I also give a lot of credit to the front office and the coaching staff for doing what they have done and still getting to the postseason and still being competitive teams in the regular season and still being some of the better teams in the regular season. That is a huge credit to those guys, like a Matt Arnold, like a Pat Murphy, even a Chris Hook, on the pitching coach for the Brewers. But this team right now, the way they're playing, and you look at their pitching staff, Mark Anasio, listen, approve, tell Matt Arnold, go get me another bat. Go get another power bat to put in this lineup, to put in the middle of the order, to provide some protection. Go get another bat. Hell, go get 2 more bats. Don't want to sell the future. Don't trade off any of your really good players. You're not going to trade Jesus Mate. Don't trade any of those guys that are probably going to be on your major league club next year or in the next couple of years. I'm not saying that. But if you can add at least 1 power bat to maybe replace Joey Ortiz or to maybe get another outfielder for a power bat, please do so. Go do it. This is a team that is, again, in a spot to go to the postseason. I think they got their 4 horses when you get to a playoff rotation of 4 starters. Miz, I know we got to watch the innings with him, but Miz, Quintana, Peralta, Woodruff's back. They've got the guys that can do it. The one thing that I think is clearly missing is another bat or 2. Go get it. Go get it. I mean, you look at, especially this Dodgers series, not the fact that the Brewers swept them, the fans, the amount of fans that showed up for those 3 games, the amount of fans that showed up for the Miz versus Paul Skeens game. You've got a dedicated fan base. Go make a move. Go make a move to help improve your team, not only to get to the postseason, but make a run in the postseason. That's going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Again, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee. please, if you could, if you got a few seconds, if you haven't done so already, if you're listening on Apple, positive review, 5 stars. I would really, really, really appreciate that. Spotify, 5 stars. I'm not kidding you. That helps get the word out there more. Spreads the wet message of the Man Cave Podcast. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate that. And don't forget to, we're up on YouTube, so don't forget to follow or subscribe. I hate using the word subscribe, but it's for free. Subscribe, follow the YouTube channel, and on Apple and Spotify too. Till next time, I'm Dan Casper. We'll talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.